All right, everyone, welcome to Office Hours. It's June 10th, 2020. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it with you and then showing you the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in to participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours Slack channel, as well as follow up with an email that you can share with your team. With that said, let's kick this off. First, we have some announcements I'd like to make. These are some announcements that have come up that I've seen through our Slack community. I think the one that I'm most excited about is the Terraform 0.13 beta. This is finally delivering on the promise of for each and counts and depends on modules. So modules have been, incredibly valuable for us at Cloud Posse. We have, hundreds of them on our GitHub. But one limiting factor is how you can have multiple resources in there. So, we've been embedding a lot of count or for each type of hacks inside the module to accommodate that. Now you can actually do that on the module itself. So if you want to have, 4 Kubernetes clusters, you can do that. You can just loop the module and achieve that outcome. Any other interesting insights on the Terraform 0.13 announcement? Again, it's only a beta. It's not official yet. So one thing that Pepe brought up was concern over what does this mean for upgrading from 0.12 to 0.13? And as we all know, upgrading from 0.11 to 0.12 was a real pain in the butt. But I wouldn't say it was because we were upgrading from Terraform 0.11 necessary to 12. It was that they changed the language from underneath, right? It went from HCL1 to HCL2. So for Terraform 0.12 to 0.13, the language stays the same. It's still HCL2. So we don't anticipate too many breaking changes in making this move. I believe there were there was a link I shared in the Terraform channel with some of those expected breaking changes. One that I recall was something around being more precise about the location of unofficial Terraform providers that are installed. I think you have to now specify the absolute path or something. Any other things jump out? All right. So the other announcement I'd like to make is something that we are really early in working on here, but is a contributors program with Cloud Posse. And why I'd like to bring this up is that we receive so many pull requests every single week that we're basically drowning under them, and we can't review them fast enough. So a few of our regular contributors have reached out to us about this, and we've created this contributors Slack channel under our SuiteOps team. And what we're going to do is start adding more people to our organization as contributors that can participate in the code reviews, so we can hopefully accelerate the rate at which we're reviewing pull requests. Another limiting factor has been running our tests against the repositories. While we really like CodeFresh, the ChatOps capabilities of CodeFresh on public repos for pull requests originating from forks doesn't work very well. And it's a sad story, to be honest, with pretty much every vendor out there in the CICD space, because look, open source doesn't pay the bills. Nobody's, very few enterprises have this problem, so they're not optimizing around it. So anyways, we moved over to GitHub Actions. It's still, it's better and it works, but it still kind of sucks if you ask me now, having done it. But we can test now at a faster rate, at least everything that we have. So if you're blocked, let me know. we have a PR reviews channel on our Slack team. That's the best place to post links to any pull requests you've locked on. All right. And the other thing is, sorry, yep, go on.
What did you, what issues were you running into trying to do builds or, CI off of forks?
Yeah, yeah. So there's just one little thing, and that explodes the scope by 80%. That one little thing is that secrets are not accessible on tests that run from pull requests on forks, that are made. So if we want to test that pull request against our testing infrastructure repository, we need a secret for the AWS keys. Can't do that. If we want a token to be able to communicate with GitHub and store that as a secret, we can't do that. So what you have to do is this mechanism, which is called dispatching. So what you do is you dispatch using ChatOps commands, so an issue comment, to another repository which has those tokens. And then that repository runs the test against this repository. But the problem with dispatching, it only works against the master branch. So any statuses that get written are written to the commit of the most recent commit in master. So if that test passes, it's updating the commit SHA on master, which is not what we want. We want to update the commit status on the pull request. So that means we have to re-implement the entire GitHub status integrations that you would get for free on every other pull request. So
I know I've done it, but I don't think I've ever used secrets. So you're saying like if I added a variable to the trigger, for example, under the, if you click edit on the trigger, you can go down and you can add variables and you can call them encrypted or not. Those do not pass through.
Yeah, so because it would be a security vulnerability. So this is not like a GitHub Actions thing. This is like Travis, this is CodeFresh, this is all of them. They won't automatically trigger that pipeline, or if they do, they won't pass the secrets to it, and then your test will fail. So like in this case here, the test command, you'll see like, to be honest, this is like 20 lines. If this stuff just worked out of the box, this would be 20 lines of test code, but it doesn't. So what I need to do is when the run starts, I need to update the GitHub status that it's pending. Then I need to check out the code, but I need to check out the code relative to the pull request and that ref. Now this is all the testing I wanted to do, but now I also need to update the GitHub status if it failed. I need to update the GitHub status if it's succeeded. I need to update the GitHub status if it canceled. And then I need to do that for every job. So then we have another job here that's called bats, and we do the same thing. So this is why it really is a real pain in the butt to do testing on for open source projects. And you would think GitHub, out of all companies out there, would have had a better story for this. So there's a lot of issues on the github.community, which is running discourse. If you guys, oops, I totally bundled that. Which is a great resource. If you are working on GitHub Actions, this is a great resource for finding the answers to everything. So this is where I searched for that. And there's open conversations on this. Can't we like bless a fork or something like that and then trust it and then run it just like normal? But nothing like that's been implemented yet.
What I ended up doing was making it so it would only run if you put a / command in the PR. So only contributors or owners could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So so that helps. But so only contributors or owners can run the / commands. What was the thought there? So
So you would look at the PR first and go, okay, is it running, you know,
But
did they change something to run some shell script to extract their variables out? And if they're not, okay, let's run it.
which is true, but slash commands only work on the workflows in the master branch. So you first have to have the workflows there committed too. It's just one other caveat. So if the workflows are in the master branch, then the commits are, the statuses are actually updating the master status. They're not updating the status of the pull request. Which
I'm taking up too much time.
Well, yeah. So that was the little nuance. It's like you just want this one little thing, and then it all explodes in scope for that. So when I say the status, it's when you look at a pull request here, you want these statuses here, right? And those depend on where the action runs, and if the action isn't running on your commit, the action is running from the master commit. Now the master status is updated instead of your pull request branch. So anyways, in the weeds, just be aware of that. GitHub Actions work really well when you're just working on branches in a repository, but it totally sucks when you're working on open source. So the only other thing I want to announce is more guest speakers are planned. I'm reaching out to more and more people who are subject matter experts. If you're a subject matter expert on something, could be, you know, we've worked Flux, could be GitHub Actions, could be Jenkins, could be, you know, pretty much any one technology out there. If it sounds interesting and you're really good at it, ping me because we'd love to pick your brain on one of our office hour sessions in the future. So with that said, let's move over and start going over any questions that have been asked. Let's open up the office hours Slack channel here and see what's going on. All right, so David, were you able to get your audio working? Let's see here. Join from browser. All right, so you can reach out to us later. We'll figure out your Slack situation here. No questions have been posted here, so anyone have any questions you'd like to bring up or ask the community? We've got about 25 people on the call right now.
No pressure.
No pressure. And
something
that's never a stupid question. So really, it can be anything.
Not a question, but an observation I made the other day that for Jenkins again, right? Because I'm all Jenkins all the time right now, unfortunately. Something that I thought was common knowledge, but turns out was not, at least in my circle, was that the Jenkins functionality called pipeline syntax, where you can go into this page and, like, for example, you have to do like a with credentials block, and it's like kind of, you have to struggle with it. You have to go look up the documentation, whatever. Don't do any of that. Go over to the left, click the button that says pipeline syntax, go to the dropdown, go to like with credentials or whatever, and it lets you actually build it with dropdowns for your credentials that it can find and everything. You know, and you hit go, and it just dumps it to a text box that you can just copy and paste into your Jenkins file.
Ah, that's kind of cool. Do you have is this, am I on the right link right here?
That's from the docs. I can, if you want me to show it, I can.
Yeah, you want to just do a quick screen share and show what that looks like?
Sure.
But this is wait, this is built into Jenkins, or you said it's an
built into Jenkins? Yep, everybody has it.
That's cool.
Actually, no. I think it's part of the Jenkins declarative pipeline plugin, which almost everybody uses. So it's like one of the standard, you know, built-in. I don't think it's built-in, but everybody picks it. Let me get into a repo here. Yeah, okay. I can share if you want me to.
And while Andrew's getting that set up, if anybody has any
you have to
questions,
stop sharing.
Feel free to post them. Yep, I'll stop sharing here.
So I have a question. My name's
Oh,
Himal.
can you just post it to office hours first? Andrew's going to do a quick screen share.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, no problem.
So I just have open a demo. I have open a demo repo that I've done a bunch of work in. But it's this button over on the left that says pipeline syntax. And when you click that, it gives you all these different things that it can build. And so the one I use it for the most is with credentials. So I'll just go down to with credentials here. And it actually gives me like, okay, what kind of credential is it? In this case, it's a separated username and password. Okay, so which credential do you want? I want, my GitLab creds. Bam. And then you say, okay, this is, GitLab username, and this is GitLab token. Bam. There's your with credentials block right there. So I thought this was kind of common knowledge, but I did it, and with a few people watching, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" So.
No, that's a cool little pro tip there. I didn't know about that either. So one doesn't have to tear around the docs trying to figure it out. All right, somebody else had a question there. They just mentioned. Let's see if it's in office hours here.
I haven't typed it in yet. Not logged into the Slack. But can you guys hear me at all?
Yep, you loud and clear.
Yeah, so my question is actually, I could just ask it here if you'd like. So it's more of with Terraform and doing, say, blue-green deployments with EC2 instances. And how do you handle, say, when you have, say, post-deployments tasks that you want to handle? Is that possible to do with Terraform, or what would you have to do to kind of take that kind of workflow to the next step, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. A little bit more context. Are those EC2 instances running in autoscale groups, or are they just standalone instances?
They'll be autoscaling groups.
Okay. And then these post-deployment tasks, are these something that you want to do on every single instance, or is this something you just want to do once per autoscale group, so to say, one operation?
Yeah, they're probably single instance tasks, like say database migrations,
okay,
or some kind of, so things like those. Or sometimes we have messaging systems where we have to create queues and so forth. So
yeah,
handling those things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So then, and then the other question is, you're obviously not using Kubernetes probably for this then?
No, at the moment, not Kubernetes. And even if we do want to go container route, probably ECS route, not yet EKS route.
Yeah. So just generally prescriptive advice, not necessarily that actionable. Unfortunately, I can't really point you to any examples because we've been mostly in Kubernetes for the last couple of years. But the idea there of having something listening to an SNS queue and then running that, then having each worker node subscribe to that queue, and the first one that gets that message runs it. There are other tools out there that can facilitate this. But off the top of my head, I don't remember the name.
I see. Okay, so you're saying leverage an SNS queue. So say at the end of a deployment, for example, you post a message there that then you have workers that then will just execute those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
That would be the general pattern. Whether you use SNS or SQS, it's kind of moot. The other things you can do is have lambdas listening for those events and performing operations at your behest. There's also the AWS pipelines.
Yeah, the AWS pipeline is also one that's like an orchestrator above, say, Terraform then. Okay.
Yeah. But like in just your pure Terraform, so the controls aren't really that good for what you want to do. Like you can start running commands immediately after the autoscale group is provisioned, but knowing when the nodes come online, that's really event driven. And what if they never come online? So that's why having it decoupled is the way to go there.
That makes sense.
Anybody have more actionable recommendations for Hilal?
Well, this is Pepe. We use queues, but sadly we can't actually use any Amazon products for the queues.
Mm.
So we use something called Hazelcast, which is
Yeah.
instantiated from the code. So in that case, we actually have worker nodes that builds the queue server, and then we have these other scanners that basically subscribe to that queue and then grab one of the scans and then, okay, I'm going to process this and so on. So the queue is always built by these web workers, and we use a plugin, an Amazon plugin that is only supported by in ECS with the host network setting, which then it was going to discover all the new web workers that are being added to the queue to create the cluster of the queue. And then you have subscribers everywhere, basically. So that's how we do it. And it's all, well, in this case, I think that they have more support for other languages, but we use Java for that.
Okay. It reminded me of Gearman. This was, I mean, this,
Yeah.
I'm dating myself. Like, this was pretty cool years ago, but it looks like it's still actively maintained. I mean, commits as recently as April. So what stood out to me about Gearman was it's just a super simple architecture to deploy.
Oh, that helps.
At least, yeah. So between that and some keyword searching, I'm sure you'll find something. If you join us next week, you can always let us know what you kind of came up with.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And then what about ECS? Like you said, you guys are mostly Kubernetes. Have you guys done any ECS at all?
We have done a bunch of ECS, and we have a bunch of Terraform modules around ECS that we continue to kind of support in terms of PR reviews. We're not pushing them forward because we're doing everything EKS these days.
Gotcha.
So in EKS, you would just use a job, right? A
Gotcha.
Kubernetes job that would run the migration for you. And if we're using Helm, we're typically using a pre-install hook to run the upgrades before we deploy.
Gotcha. And would those be within the container, or would you?
Yeah, so those would run as a container as part of the deployment process. So the migration would just be a separate container that just does migration.
Gotcha. Because I've used this tool. I don't know if you've heard of Bosch, any chance? BOSH. It's one for Cloud Foundry mainly, and it kind of had that same concept as you have these runoff tasks that you run as quote unquote errands.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had your jobs that actually ran continuously. It's a long living process. But when a job starts, you had, your pre-start hooks, your post-start hooks, your pre-drain scripts, or any of those things. So
yeah,
Kubernetes has, I guess, the same setups.
Yeah, well, okay, so yes and no. So I mean, there's within Kubernetes, a pod can have something called an init container, but that's not necessarily that ideally suited because that init container runs on every instance of that pod. So if you had 25 pods, you're going to have 25 init containers before that pod starts. It's really to set up the environment for the pod. This is why the alternative resource that's used is a job, and a job just runs as many number of times as you tell it to run, and then you can just describe what should happen if errors happen, if it should restart, if it should just give up, and if this job has to complete within a certain time deadline. Those are some of the concepts of the job in Kubernetes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then when you're using Helm, which is an abstraction on top of Kubernetes, Helm then has its own constructs for how to use jobs, basically using a label on that. And then we use another tool called Helm File, and Helm File sits on top of Helm, and Helm has its own hooks. So it's kind of like, the reality is that you need these things that happen at different parts of the life cycle.
Correct.
And that's why all these tools have hooks in different places.
Yeah, because right now we are at that EC2 level. We haven't yet gone up that abstraction layer, but cool. Because you could technically replicate the same thing with the EC2 setup. It's just going to be probably a little more work.
Yeah, the other thing I haven't looked into doing is you could probably, if you're deploying this SSM agent on every node, you can probably use that in some way to run the migrations. So
Yeah,
it
we
was
were looking
one
at
of
that.
those.
Like you could create some documents in AWS that you could then have those get triggered.
Yeah.
But it's just making sure the correct versions of those are run is what we're trying to figure out now.
Yeah, but you manage those documents still with Terraform, right? So
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
yeah. So and then Terraform can actually trigger, I believe, SSM runs as well. So that could give you an end-to-end automation for what you're trying to do, maybe.
Hmm. Cool.
Cool. Any other questions?
Eric, do you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Birjan from Turkey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going okay. It's night now.
Yeah,
I'm
thanks for
going to
joining
ask
us.
a question about Kubernetes. I'm new to Kubernetes. We are trying to create a EKS cluster. I'm playing around with it, but recently I experienced a weird problem. I can say it's a pod eviction problem. It's Kubernetes evicts the pod. For example, if one node is got out of resources, then the latest pod is evicted.
Yeah.
And then the resources then Kubernetes deploys the pod again and evicts again and deploys again, and it's like for example, I ended up with 60 evicted pods.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts come to mind. First, are you using resources and limits correctly on your pods?
I actually did not use resource because I expected Kubernetes organize the resources for me, but in
Well,
fact,
and
it's
it
not.
is. It's doing an excellent job of it, just not the job you wanted it to do.
What kind of excellent job this is? 60 evicted pods and counting. So I'm asking this:
Yeah.
should I allocate resources precisely? I mean, I'm guaranteed option, not burstable, to avoid this pod eviction
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. That's the key thing here is that to minimize. So you can do guaranteed to basically eliminate it, barring like infrastructure problems, like barring the node going away.
Yeah, but then I end up with I mean not organized automatically, but so I allocate resources manually. So for example, a pod can end up with a usage of did you understand what I mean? For example,
Well, yeah. So, well, let's just step back.
I want it automatically organized by Kubernetes. Not
which
for example,
it's going to do.
I don't want my resources to allocate to one pod because maybe it is not running at that time. So I want it automatically organized by Kubernetes. How can I do this? Is it possible?
So I mean, there are just different things to optimize for, right? So Kubernetes, like these systems don't work magic, and you know, so if we're asking it to schedule, to plan for how to use the resources in the most efficient way. When we're saying that, well, we have no idea how much memory and we have no idea how much CPU, then it's a lottery. Like, I'm just going to throw this pod anywhere, hoping it's going to be good. But then that pod suddenly needs more memory. Well, now suddenly I have to do my job, which is to, well, I being the Kubernetes scheduler, I have to move that pod somewhere else where I can suddenly accommodate those new resource limits. So this is why setting the resources and limits is a hint to the scheduler.
Do you use guaranteed mode? Do you use guaranteed mode? It's the best practice. Guaranteed mode. I mean, limit.
Well, yeah, so really, yes, you can't. Best practices are scoped to what you're trying to achieve. So if you're dealing with persistent volumes, persistent data, in-memory cache, things that don't like volatility, anywhere you don't tolerate volatility, you're going to want to use guaranteed QoS. And anywhere that you tolerate
immutable pods, then it's not persistent. Then if it's not persistent?
If it's not persistent, well, so if it's not, the other thing to keep in mind is how many of these pods do you have running? If you only have 1 or 2 pods, you know, you lose one, that's a 50% outage. That's a big deal. But if you're running 1,000 pods and you have 20, 30 pods getting rescheduled all the time, it's maybe less of a deal. So the size of the workloads that you're running, I would think, is a consideration as well.
Okay.
I have maybe a little bit
Guaranteed
better
is
way
best,
to.
I mean.
Yeah,
So-
Andrew, just definitely chime in.
Okay, so when you are burstable and you are bursting above the request, your pod is at risk of the scheduler terminating it because it sees that something else that is more important needs to get scheduled.
Yeah.
If you are guaranteed, that will never ever happen. So that's the difference between burstable and guaranteed. If you're burstable and you are bursting above the resource request, then it is at risk of being terminated. Guaranteed eliminates that. If you are not bursting above the request, you're not going to get terminated either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the problem here is it gets into a loop. For 60 evicted pods, it evicts the pod, then deploys it again, evicts the pod and deploys it again. Because when it evicts the pod, the resources get lower, then deploys it again.
Yeah.
Then so this is I mean problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not
how big is your cluster, first of all, that you're working with? I mean, how many nodes are in the cluster? How many resources?
Okay. So, I did not set up horizontal pod scaler. Maybe it's because of it. Do you use horizontal pod scaler for auto
Well, yeah. So there's horizontal pod scaler, and then there's the cluster autoscaler. The cluster autoscaler will make sure that you have enough resources available in the cluster, while the horizontal pods autoscaler will make sure you have enough resources to serve your request load.
If you're not setting any resource requests, limits don't really matter in this case. Requests are what matters. If you're not setting any requests, the scheduler in Kubernetes has no idea how much memory or CPU it actually needs, and so it will schedule it to whatever it finds convenient. You know, so the way you fix your problem is put resource requests in everything you deploy, because the scheduler looks at the requests. It does not look at the limits, it looks at the requests.
Okay. Can I ask another question?
Yeah, one second. I was also, there was a great link posted, shoot, and I just lost it, in office hours here about the most common problems, you know, lessons learned the hard way. And this really captures a lot of them. So definitely have a look at the 10 most common mistakes when using Kubernetes and not using resources in the midst.
Can you share the link, please?
Yeah, it's in office hours.
Oh, okay.
So if you haven't joined our Slack team yet, and this goes for anybody here, go to slack.cloudposse.com, slack.cloudposse.com, register there, and then go into the office hours channel. That's where we share, that's like the permanent record of everything that we're sharing.
Okay. Another thing I want to ask. I'm working on Cloud Pose Terraform AWS Cloud build for a while, for about 1 month. I'm using it a lot, and it has a lot of missing features. I added them to contribute, and I've sent a request to review. How can these things be reviewed and merged?
Yeah, so I don't know if you heard us, the very first announcement today is just that we're drowning.
Sorry.
So first of all, Cloud Posse, we are a 7-person company. So if we give off a bigger, if we project that we're larger, my apologies. So
it means you're doing something right.
Yeah, we're managing hundreds of repositories. So we're literally drowning under pull requests, and then and the pull requests are ultimately just a labor of love. So
I understand.
we're mostly working on client engagements. That said, that's why we're opening up now our contributor program here. I want to get more trusted contributors into our GitHub organization to help review the pull requests and to be able to run the GitOps commands to run the tests. So I have seen there are a bunch of PRs here. I think you see, actually 2 hours ago, we opened up the PR to add the ChatOps commands. So we're going to be able to accelerate the reviews against the code build repository here as well. So I guess all I have to say is give us a day or so. Hopefully we'll get to reviewing them so that we can run the tests. Also, the other thing to make sure is if you are submitting pull requests against our repos is to make sure that when you run the tests here, that these tests pass. So we're using TerraTest. We could have better documentation on this, I confess. But we have a basic test here that just makes sure that the module is you can bring up a stack and you can tear it down as well. And that catches like 80% of the problems we see with Terraform code. And we have a make file here. All you need to do is run make test. And that sets up everything for you. Test calls init sets up the, all the test scaffolding. So if you go into the source directory and you just run make test, it should work for you if you have your Go environment set up. If you don't have Go,
available in all repositories?
Almost every single repository that we have, which is HCL2, has TerraTest. This is why also we're pretty slow right now at reviewing pull requests for non-0.12 modules, and why we're not accepting. There are a lot of pull requests out there for just adding 0.12 support, but we're only doing 0.12 support with TerraTest as kind of a way for us to ensure that modules get updated with tests. So the tests are really helping us to validate the changes, the number of pull requests that we're getting. The problem has been the test infrastructure for running them, which relates to the other thing with GitHub Actions. Basically, GitHub Actions and public forks don't play well together. Anyways, we're past that now, though. So, so the other thing to note is if you're in our Slack community, then and you have a pull request that you want to emphasize, this is the best way to do it. Go to the PR reviews channel and post your pull requests here to get attention to it over other pull requests.
Hello?
Yeah, hey, Raul.
Hello, hi, Rick. Hi, everyone. This is my first call.
Welcome.
Okay. So my question is, I have EK set up. Okay. So my issue is at the load balancing level. Okay. So what happens is, let's say I have one node and I have 2 pods running in it. And this load is not evenly distributed. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's say if I add 3 more pods into it, and 2 pods are getting request and other 3 are just sitting there idle.
Yeah. Are you using, this comes down to your ingress controller as well. So which ingress, correct. Which ingress controller are you using?
I'm using the ALB one.
Okay. I don't have good things to say about the ALB ingress controller for other reasons, but other people might be using it with much success and can share how to improve your experience. I still stand by the tried and true Nginx ingress controller, because that's going to be using, because when you're using, the difference here is when you're using the ALB ingress controller, first is every single ingress that you define, ingress CRD, creates a load balancer. At least that's how it used to work. I don't know if they've fixed that yet, but that was a non-starter. 2, you're going to be at the mercy of the ALB ingress controller and how it's routing the traffic to your pods versus if you're using Nginx ingress. When you're using Nginx ingress, it doesn't matter which ingress receives that request. Nginx on the back end is going to be load balancing that, I believe round robin style to the pods. behind it.
The thing is, I need a context-based routing. Does Nginx controller supports that? That's why I'm using ALB.
Context-based routing?
Yes, like so let's say if slash test, if a request comes with slash test, I need to route it to this port.
Yeah, that's totally supported by Nginx Ingress. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
path-based
okay, cool.
routing is path. This comes down to basically, so Ingress is a resource type, and that resource type supports hostname and path-based routing. Then it's the job of the controller to implement that spec. And yeah, Nginx does that from day one. And then there's a bunch of other Ingress controllers out there as well.
Okay, one more question. Anyway, I have moved this to production, so I have to rework it in stage and then move it to production. So currently suck. This, yeah,
that would currently really this because the load balancer would change, which means the DNS needs to change, which means automating this from a deployment perspective will be messy.
Yeah, correct. So this is the current setup I had. So I have come up with a solution by using IPVS at the Kubernetes level. So I have I'm currently using IPVS to distribute the traffic, which is a little more effective way of traffic distribution to pods. But the thing is, if I need to use IPVS in EKS, I need to install some kernel. I need to update some kerneling in Node.
Yeah.
EKS nodes.
I wouldn't leave that Easter egg for anybody else to figure out. You'll get it working, I'm sure. And then it's going to be this thing that's going to make it scary every time you want to upgrade your EKS clusters for the next person who has to manage it.
Correct. The thing is, my company have an AWS account manager. So that the response I got from them is, if I made a change in EKS worker node kernel, they won't be supporting any EKS related issue.
And you're not going to be able to use the fully managed EKS node pools either, which I think is a value add. So I don't know, anybody have more experience with the ALB ingress and the configuring the load balancing strategy? Have you tried using the NLB as opposed to the, well, okay, never mind. You're not using.
The thing is, I am using NLB. You know how? Like the first layer is NLB.
Nginx
first level is NLB. Second, that comes to ALB, then comes to my node.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but ALB. Yeah, please.
This is Eric. I just want to interject one thing real quick. We're looking at implementing the AWS WAF, and that requires the ALB. So I have been looking at what exactly I have to change in my Terraform to switch from the ELB to the ALB.
That's a good caveat to point out there, that you would need to do that.
Does not work with the network load balancers, apparently. Just ALBs.
That's annoying. Good to know. Thank you for pointing that out. That's
sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this is it.
Yeah. I mean,
I ask a quick follow-up question to Rahul about NLB pointing to ALB. I just wanted to know how you're doing that. I saw an AWS solution for putting up a Lambda function that keeps updating targets on NLB to get in sync with whenever there's an IP address change for the ALB. But I wanted to know if there's any other way to do that.
Currently our setup infra looks like top of the layer is NLB, AWS NLB. Below that it is ALB ingress controller that is within the EKS. So that and below that the EC2 and port level. The thing is this ALB, our subnet are in private range. It is not in the public range. So this ingress ALB created with the private subnet range, and it is pointing to NLB, which is and the thing is we can't as per our company policy, we can't expose our endpoint in AWS. So what we have done is we have pointed that NLB to our DC firewall. Then and then we have we have routed it through NAT and then expose it through our DC firewall.
All right. Yeah, sorry, I don't think we answered your question specifically, but
yeah, that's a different solution. I was actually looking if somebody tried pointing NLB to ALB because NLB needs a static IP address and ALB IP addresses can change. And I did see some of the AWS solutions out there, but nothing is actually working out. So yeah, I just wanted to check.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know we've used an NLB to point it to expose a RDS cluster on a private subnet. And I forget how we did that, but that's what I was trying to look up here. It's been a while though. Like you said,
what about EIPs for the ALB? Can't you use elastic IPs to lock down what the IP is, so you will always have
that would work.
That's consistent.
Yeah.
But I do know that elastic IPs and ALBs were broken in the ALB ingress controller. Maybe they fixed that now.
I mean, another thing I might point out is the network load balancers are very limited. They're limited to level 4, like layer 4 TCP traffic, right? If you're hard coding IPs for them to go to that can change, you're just interjecting another point of instability in your system. So I kind of look at why you need that NLB rather than going straight to an application load balancer or something else in Amazon. Anytime you're trying to use like an NLB to solve some weird problem, I feel like you may not be thinking the Amazon way about stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a true point.
So, okay, let me ask this then. So I added a network load balancer in there because we were trying to use, trying to expose the application as a service using endpoint service. So basically create a network load balancer and configure VPC service on top of that. So I can reach it from another, say another AWS account using private links. So that's how we started doing the NLB part. But I do need NLB and ALB both in there. That's why I was trying to work out this solution.
So if I'm understanding right, your goal is to expose some service, some private service in AWS to other AWS accounts over private links.
Yep.
So like a pretty common way to handle this is Amazon has it. They call it their 2-tier web architecture. So you would have a private load balancer, like an application load balancer per se, that serves up the traffic to your service that's in your private subnets, and then you would have a public one that could serve it up to the internet. And those are, and so you could have a public ALB that has a target of that, private. But for the other subnets that go over the private links, you can set it up so they just use that internal load balancer. At least that's what we've done for some of our stuff. So there's no reason to that way you could stay on your private link between your two accounts, but you still get all the load balancing that you have. And you don't have to have extra infrastructure just to do that. You just separate your 2 tiers. You have a public tier and a private tier, and the private tier exposes the service. The public tier exposes just what you need out to the outside world. And then your internal links, your VPC links can use those private tier load balancers. If I'm understanding correctly, I may not be.
No, I see what you're saying. Haven't tried it, but yeah, I'm gonna take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, the keyword to search there is a 2-tier web architecture. If you look up for AWS reference architectures, you can get some nice graphics from them about kind of how it looks.
Yep.
Hey, I have a question. This is Sarat. Long time to see everyone. So I am working on a project to connect, AWS and Azure. Have anyone tried some, setups to do VPN between both?
Yeah, no, I don't have experience. Maybe somebody else on the call does.
Don't.
Okay,
Unless
so
you really
I'll
need
come
to.
up. Yeah, because the things are. I mean, we are moving. So one of the customers is moving away from Azure, but to move away, they still need the connectivity to transfer and connect the stuff from AWS. So yeah, so that's an interesting project that I'm working on. But I'll let you know how it goes
Yeah.
next week.
No worries.
Cross availability zone is sometimes challenging. Cross region is usually challenging. Cross CSP is always challenging. I've had clients who are, running military bases and, high security stuff and have said, I want everything in AWS and Azure. And, once we get into the crux of the problem, it turns out, well, no, that's actually, is not necessary.
Yeah. So I'm exploring the solutions around it. I'll let everyone know how it goes, what I ended up doing with.
Cool. We have another 5 minutes or so. Any other questions for the group?
I've wondered when Nginx Ingress is going to move from creating classic load balancers to the newer ones.
Oh, it supports NLBs today.
Is that the newer one, NLB? If I have a
Yeah,
classic load balancer, the new one is NLB?
Well, yes, you got NLB, ALB,
and DLB,
classic. Yeah,
right?
and ELB classic, yeah.
Oh,
They're all
that's
ELBs.
So
that, right, true.
NLBs is just one annotation that you need to add to your
That's good to know.
Ingress
See,
controller.
that's why I come to these.
Yeah. And it's
Does
a
it
quick win
support
because now
only-
you get client source IPs when you do that.
Does it support only NLBs or does it also support ALBs?
No, it doesn't work with because ALBs are
They're a different layer.
Yeah, they're layer
different
7 load balancer. I understand, but
yeah,
the nice thing if it did is you could attach a WAF then.
Exactly, that would have solved everything.
In front of your Ingress Nginx or Nginx Ingress.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Hey, Brian.
For those of you working with Prometheus, anybody have like good resources for doing kind of like metric relabeling and or general relabeling to like lower your cardinality? I'm trying to relabel just some metrics, just because my cardinality is pretty high for those particular metrics. I'm trying to relabel just a subset of metrics with like a certain prefix, but I'm not quite sure. Reading like documentation, it seems like most people are pretty not that great at figuring out how to write those configurations.
Yeah,
anybody have any?
I don't have anything to add to that.
Do you guys like people that use Prometheus operator? You guys just use all the defaults? You guys don't drop any labels or anything, or add custom metrics?
We've added custom exporters to increase the number of metrics that are there, but we haven't really gone beyond customizing the default
application level metrics.
Oh, the application level metrics.
Yeah.
Cloud Posse, we haven't been focused on that right now.
I see. Yeah, so we're like shipping application level metrics, but we also want to do it per customer. So like because we have n number of customers times n number of requests, or m number of requests times 12 buckets times whatever, the cardinality just like spikes a lot, and then we kind of just get high memory usage from our Prometheus pods.
So this is where you might really enjoy moving to Thanos, where it really reduces your operating costs in one way, which is that you have you need very short retention per cluster. So you can have just 6-hour retention on the cluster, and then S3 becomes your backend, and all the complexity is offloaded to the querier and merged in real time and resampled on a regular basis. I forget what that compaction process is called.
I can't even, at least with our application metrics, because our cardinality is so high, I can't even get it to run for more than like 10 minutes. So yeah, just because like we have like, you know, we have like 1,000, like the cardinality multiplier just goes crazy after a certain point, especially because we have like, we spin up like separate APIs for each one, and then each API has like 200, 300 different request routes, and we want to ship, you know, metrics for every single one. So
I mean,
that times number of clients times number of metrics we want to ship, just
yeah.
Speaking more generally, you know, the issue is of scalability, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's some, you know, the way you architect your application is scalable so far, and it sounds like you're starting to break those bounds. You know, so maybe it's time for a re-architecture of some kind.
Yeah.
I mean, so the application is scaling well, but it's the information architecture or the monitoring architecture.
It's really getting the application level metrics that we never had information about, like, you know, historically for this client, you know, this request takes this amount of seconds or whatever, milliseconds. Trying to surface those in a historical way via Prometheus. So just going down that route. I don't know if going down that route, like if that doesn't work via Prometheus, that requires us to rewrite our app.
You can always use CloudWatch and spend 25 cents per metric. I think it would cost you, you know, a couple million a year. That's all.
Yeah, but we were thinking maybe just bypassing using Prometheus and probably just scraping those metrics with like a custom service that can drop certain things. But I don't know yet. So I guess people haven't really gone down the route of doing like Prometheus metric relabeling.
Yeah, I guess that, but I mean, the other thing, I mean, the bigger thing is have people had to deal with the metric sprawl that you have. I'm sure larger companies definitely are running into that.
Has anyone tried Loki yet?
No.
The one thing I might note about Prometheus is in their docs, they mention not to store dimensions with high cardinality with labels. Like, don't use labels to store them because it can cause issues. I don't know too much about this, but I've been trying to push our application developers to start using Prometheus for application level metrics. And as some are, we haven't had any problems like you're having, but I might recommend reviewing the docs around metrics and label naming under their best practices section, and make sure that you're actually following some of those if you're not already.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now, is like drop some labels that increase the cardinality. So like, I don't really care about which pod the metric was from. I just care about the namespace for each client. So I want to drop like the pod. I don't care about the IPs because those aren't information that I need for these application level metrics. But definitely having those in the labels right now, or having those labels in our metrics right now is increasing our cardinality. So trying to figure out how to drop those labels.
That sounds interesting. Brian, please report back once you figure it out.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we are at that time. Any closing thoughts before we transition here into winding things down? All right, everyone, looks like we've reached the end of the hour. That about wraps things up. Remember to share. Let's see here. I probably forgot to, I'm not sharing my screen, am I?
No.
Yeah, I got tricked there. Let's do this. There we go. All right, everyone, remember to register for our weekly office hours. If you haven't already, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. And if you want to book a session with me anytime, you can go to cloudposse.com/ hours/quiz. Lastly, just to reiterate something I brought up earlier, if you're a subject matter expert and would like to be a guest speaker on that topic, please reach out to me. We'd like to have you join and pick your brain on what you know about that technology. Thanks everyone for sharing. We always learn so much. Recording of this call will be posted in the Office Hours channel and syndicated to our podcast at podcast.cloudposse.com. See you guys next week, same place, same time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.